you see over and over and over in conspiracy circles, once they see the world through distrustful eyes and they think they're being lied to, that colors their perceptions of all subsequent events. In fact, many of the people I interviewed for my book are conspiracy theorists from the JFK era. And they just basically never stopped seeing the world as one big conspiracy. The question I get is, are there real conspiracies? You know, I've written this book about conspiracy theories. Surely there are real conspiracies. Of course there are real conspiracies. Real life conspiracies, though, tend to be small and grubby and primarily about money and sex.
No.
Classic example in Canada, there was some, I expect no one in this room to know about this except for David, the sponsorship scandal. Sponsorship scandal was sort of the Canada's Watergate of my era, I guess. And, you know, it was sort of a small-scale thing involving a bunch of operatives from the Liberal Party trying to buy votes in Quebec. The thing was done amateurishly. It was quickly unraveled. Everyone involved was identified. And that's more or less how conspiracies work in government, because most people in government are incompetent, or they can't keep secrets. Watergate was another classic example of a bungled amateurish operation that took place on a fairly small scale but had wide repercussions. The kind of much larger, more sinister, epic, soap opera type conspiracies like 9/11, those kind of things are completely beyond the power of incompetent government officials to pull off, even if they wanted to pull them off, which is dubious, because they simply lack the ability to do that kind of thing in secret.
It's called the Federal Reserve.
Okay, we have a lot of people in the room apparently have great faith in our government leaders to pull off these incredible operations. But one thing, again, I will concede something. If you are in Syria and someone says to you, hey, I think the government is conspiring to kill us, that's not a conspiracy theory. If there's a tank down the street firing shells at you, it's not a conspiracy theory that someone in Iran or North Korea or Syria, that the government is trying to kill you. And I make that very clear in my book. And that's because those are closed societies where the governments truly do control all the levers of power. There's no independent political system, there's no independent media. So if government elites want to conspire to murder thousands of their citizens, they can do that. That kind of thing is very difficult to do in Western open societies, because we have an independent media, because we have an independent...
Give me a break.
When I give a speech, I mention the media, I always get laugh lines from folks like that. They say, oh, the media independent, that's crazy. I wish the people who are laughing could be the National Post offices or any media office of the last 10 years and see how many people who used to be on our payroll have become independent freelancers and answer to nobody. And those people truly are independent, and they're independent through nobody's will. It's not out of their own free will that they're independent. They've basically been fired. This is the state of the modern media. So the idea that I, as an editor, or that David Frum, or that anybody can control America's media or Canada's media, anybody who's been a practicing journalist knows that this isn't true.
Back in bailouts.
In terms of 9/11, if 9/11 truly were an inside job, and I say this as a journalist, if 9/11 truly were an inside job, you would have 100,000 American journalists trying to win their Pulitzer Prize, finding the truth and publishing.
They've all been bought.
If Barack Obama truly was born in Kenya or Indonesia or wherever they're saying he was born now,
Caribbean.
again, same deal. You could get your prize by doing it. If 9/11 truly was an inside job, you'd get every single Democratic activist in Washington on the story, because you'd be able to discredit the GOP for the next 50 years by pulling the story. So things function very differently in closed societies where large-scale government conspiracies are possible over the long term, and open societies where they're not. And I wanted to give, before I finish, I want to give two examples, plucked from the day's headlines. Does anyone in this room know who Lene Williams is? I know about Lene Williams because she was profiled on the Daily Beast. 35-year-old woman, lives here in the Washington, D.C. area. In 2009, she worked for the CIA. They even sent her to Iraq. She went to spy camp. I'm sure she went to the museum. She learned the art of spycraft through the CIA. However, she had a falling out with the CIA back in 2009. They thought she was mentally unstable. She was at a hospital for a while. And as a result of that, she no longer works for the CIA. But she did something that you couldn't do 5 years or 10 years ago. She started tweeting about her experience. So if you look up Lene Williams on Twitter, you will find a Twitter stream from a woman tweeting secret stuff about the CIA. How is it possible in a society where some disgruntled former CIA employee is tweeting about the CIA for there to be any kind of centralized conspiracy about 9/11 or anything else that isn't instantly disclosed. In all of the millions of cables from WikiLeaks, was there one thing about any kind of 9/11 inside job?
CIA enemies.
See, there you go. Okay, one more example. Because again, this world of conspiracies, it's a very dark place, and we try and do a thought experiment. What would happen if someone went to a high-ranking government official or someone in the military and said, hey, let's stage a coup. Let's replace the current government with some kind of fascist corporate oligarchy.
Tried it already.
And I mention this because this is more or less the theme of a lot of the 9/11 conspiracy stuff you read.
Prescott Bush tried it. Yep.
All right, well, here's someone else who tried it. And again, I know this because the book just came out. It's an author named Sally Denton. She just wrote a great book. It's called The Plots Against the President. And it's about all the fascistic intrigues against FDR back in 1933, 1934. And there's a fascinating story in there about a general named Smedley Butler. Now, Smedley Butler is not a household name now, but back in his day, 30s, he was sort of the Colin Powell of his era. He was an extremely popular general. And one day, someone knocked on his door. The story is recounted in this book by Sally Denton. And it was your stereotypical emissaries from the military-industrial complex. And they had a big fat checkbook, they had Wall Street money, and they went to Smedley Butler and they said, you know what, this FDR thing isn't working out. And we're thinking of imposing a sort of fascistic dictatorship on the United States to rescue it from the Great Depression. Are you in? And as I was reading, I said, wow, this is right out of a 9/11 conspiracy theorist fantasy, except it took place in 1934 instead of 2001. And what do you think Smedley Butler did? Smedley Butler went to the media. He had a friend who worked for a Philadelphia newspaper. He said, hey, these creeps are trying to bribe me to create a coup. The story went out. It became the subject of congressional investigations. Everybody involved was disgraced. And that is how things work in an open society when people come to you and say, hey, let's stage a coup and create a fascistic government. And this was back in the age when fascism still had a good name. Mussolini back in 1934 was a figure of respect in the United States. Now fast forward to 9/11, fast forward to 2001, and imagine if you repeated that exercise 100 times, because that's what you need to do. If you want to blow up the World Trade Center, you can't do it with one guy. You need 100 Smedley Butlers.
Can't do it with one plane either.
You go to 100 Smedley Butlers and say, hey, what do you say? We're going to create a fascistic corporate oligarchy in the United States, but first we have to blow up a few office buildings. Are you in? How many of those people do you think wouldn't run, who knows, FBI, CIA, the media, some guy like me? They'd run somewhere. Nowadays, they'd open a Twitter account. The idea that in an open society you can keep this kind of dark conspiracy under wraps is preposterous, which is one of the reasons that I'm so skeptical of conspiracy theories. Now, the larger question is, why does this stuff matter? A lot of people who agree with me, even those people who agree with me, say, why do you write a book about this stuff? You know, let these people have their fun. It's X-Files stuff. It's internet stuff. I don't think it's just internet stuff. I think a democracy becomes ungovernable if a substantial portion of the population lives in an alternative reality. And I'm not just talking about alternative opinions. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. Everyone in this room has different opinions. But when you live in an alternative factual reality, a reality where Barack Obama was born in Kenya and is actually a Muslim seeking to impose Sharia on the United States, or the New World Order is secretly plotting to put us all in concentration camps, or 9/11 was an inside job, when you live in that kind of alternative reality, it's impossible to have any kind of democratic consensus because people can't even agree on basic facts. How are you supposed to have an argument about America's security needs with someone who believes that 9/11 was an inside job? How are you supposed to have an argument about Obamacare with someone who thinks that Obama's a secret agent from Iran? It becomes impossible. And so this isn't just about X-Files fantasies. This is about the political future of America and making sure that intelligent people can agree on certain basic facts about some of the most important events in American history. And with that, I'll conclude my presentation. Thank you.
So, don't question anything. Do it. Use journalists.
So Professor Tarpley is, I understand, going to speak with a video presentation. So that's going to mean that all of us have to, that's why we're not sitting on the stands, because you won't be able to see over our heads. I thank John for his remarks, and I'd like to now invite Mr. Tarpley to come up and present his version of reality.
Thank you very much. I wonder if I could be awarded the 5 minutes left over from the previous. No conspiracy involved.
Oh, there is a conspiracy.
All right. So here's my answer to Jonathan Kay. Can't respond to everything, but we have to think back to the tremendous abuse of the 9/11 myth, as I would call it. You can remember when in the Bush White House, the answer to everything was 9/11. Why is there a deficit? 9/11. What about the environment? 9/11. Ari, answer was 9/11. Do you have a follow-up? The Giuliani for President campaign. Verb, noun, 9/11. And that was an attempt to take over the United States government. I think we have to be alert to the danger of neo-McCarthyite thinking, that is the demonization or the witch hunt for dissidents, which can, of course, under certain circumstances, take the extreme form of the Soviet method, which was to put dissidents in wards for the mentally ill. The big question is, where is reality, and whose mind is actually fleeing from reality, since this is posed? Now, the reality that I work on is, in particular right now, war avoidance. This was a demonstration 5 years ago. Some people here, I think, were part of it. We were at the White House. Beware another fake 9/11 designed to nuke Iran, because this is the reality of our times, and we've been through it enough so that it shouldn't surprise us. Now, I have some points of agreement with Mr. Kay. I have a low opinion of postmodernism, deconstructionism, Derrida. I actually discuss Derrida in my book. I discuss Derrida, Habermas, and Richard Rorty, the three main philosophical schools of the present age, and find them all wanted, although for different reasons. I would also share his diagnosis of Michael Ruppert, without wanting to go into any details. I'm happy to leave David Icke among the lizards. I share his scorn for Rush Limbaugh, although I would point out that there is some evidence that William Buckley of the National Review was present at the creation for Limbaugh. My version of history is not that of Noam Chomsky and Howard Zinn. Howard Zinn because he hated civilization as such. Noam Chomsky because he was the most implacable enemy of 9/11 truth. I also have a low opinion of Adbusters. This is the group that has sabotaged the Occupy movement from within and deprived it of a lot of its potential. Now, points of disagreement are, of course, numerous. The goal of history, or historiography, as I practice it, is not to find conspiracies at all costs. It is to tell what actually happened, whether there was a conspiracy or not. Anyone who says that there's nothing in the world but conspiracies, that everything's a conspiracy, that the world economic depression of our time is a conspiracy, and that's all, that's paranoia. I would agree. However, we have to look at objective reality. It is economic, military, and political. And within that reality, or on that bedrock of reality, conspiracies indeed may arise. If we think of the typology of tyranny, oligarchy, and the mob, ochlocracy, we can see that the tyrant, the Stalin, or Hitler at the height of his power, doesn't need a conspiracy. He can do what he wants. He gives orders, things happen. The purely spontaneous mob is also not a conspiracy. It's sort of a free-for-all. But in that broad area in the middle, in an oligarchical situation, and that is the situation of the society that we live in, especially in the Anglo-American world, that's where conspiracies can flourish. Now, Mr. Kay's book has the disadvantage of being pre-Occupy. We now live in the post-Occupy world, and the notion of 1% oppressing the 99%, or as I would say, the oligarchy oppressing the people, is now, I think, a mainstream concept. And there's a real change in the spirit of the age. I would also note Machiavelli in his discourses. He says that the violent clash of the patricians and the plebs made possible